Okay, so we'll talk about psychological well-being and resilience, and at the end of my presentation, I will also share a short film with the aim to try to see if in this representation of reality we can find elements of psychological well-being and resilience, or lack of these elements according to the presentation. This is my conflict of interest declaration. And these are the outlines. So I will speak briefly about the biopsychosocial model, then I will define briefly psychological well-being and resilience, and for each of them I will try to put them in the framework of the biopsychosocial model. So the biopsychosocial model, well, it is quite known that the father of this biopsychosocial model is George Engel, who wrote in Science in 1977 this paper. And the basis of the proposal of this model was related to the fact that the biological model, the biomedical model, which was used in those days, showed to have limitations. And in particular, Engel wrote, the medical model constitutes a sound framework within which to understand and treat disease, but it is not relevant to the behavioral and psychological problems classically deemed to the domain of psychiatry. So we may say that the beginning of the story was related to the relevance, to start considering the person having a disease not simply as a carrier of the disease, but as a person, him or herself in reality. Indeed, Engel went on saying that there was need, so they were facing the necessity and the challenge to broaden the approach to disease, to include the psychosocial without sacrificing the enormous advantages of the biomedical approach. Indeed, Engel was trying to improve the medical view in order not to be reductionistic and not to see only the biological aspects of the patients. In actuality, he went on writing, the task is appreciably more complex than the biomedical model encourages one to believe. So this is the intention. Here he declares the intention that it's necessary not to be reductionistic. An examination of the correlations between clinical and laboratory data requires not only reliable methods of clinical data collection, specifically interviewing skills, but also understanding of the psychosocial, so the psychological, social, and cultural determinants of how patients communicate symptoms of disease. So this is this sentence is related to the relevance of having a comprehensive knowledge and view of the patients, which includes their psychological, social, cultural determinants, and which may interfere not only on how they communicate symptoms, but also on how they can live their own disease or disorder, and also on how they can make a request of aid to the health system, to the individual clinician, and so on. Psychological and social factors become crucial, become seminal in order to know the patient, and so in order to know how the patient view himself, herself, and how view himself or herself as sick. Still, other factors of a similar nature influence whether or not and when an individual enters in the healthcare system, becomes a patient and asks for an aid, and also enter into a relationship with the clinician, which can be the nurse, the medical doctor, the psychologist, the physiotherapist, and so on. And here Engel proposes an example related to diabetes. He writes that insulin requirement, so something really biological, of a diabetic patient may fluctuate significantly depending on how the patient perceives his relationships with his doctor. So something on the contrary really related to the psychological dimension of the patient and not biological at all. Furthermore, the successful application of rational therapies is limited by the physician's ability to influence and modify the patient's behavior in direction concordant with health needs. So once again, this subjective element seems to be related not only to the patient, but also to the clinicians, which are strongly linked to our, as clinicians, capacity to get in touch with the patient, to be connected to the patient, and to enter into another way relationship with the patient. Based on this, Engel proposed the multifactorial model of illness, which was based on a comprehensive view of patient as the result of interactive systems, which can go from the cellular level to the environmental level, passing via the tissue, the organismic reality, and to the interpersonal dimension. So, of course, what Engel stated was that in order to take into account all these factors, all these issues, the biological model cannot be enough. So he proposed a biopsychosocial model having which scope is determined by the historic function of the physician to establish whether the person soliciting help is sick or well, and if sick, why he or she is sick, and in which way he or she is sick. And then the illness and restore the maintain health. This is a way via which the biopsychosocial model has been represented. This is a really simple way in which it was represented. But more interesting, we can try to populate a little bit these circles. So, for instance, we may have among the biological factors which can influence health in all of us, in people, we can have, for instance, physiological reactions, tissue damages, cellular damages, genetics elements. Among the psychological factors, we may have mental health, emotional health, beliefs, expectations, which can be related to health, to illness, to the environment, to the people that each of us has around. And also, if we want to bring some sociological examples of factors which can influence health and so also illness, we can consider interpersonal relationships, social support dynamics, socioeconomics elements. But what Engels highlighted was not only the relevance of what we can put on each of these three circles, but also the fact that these three circles overlap. So there is an overlap between biological and social factors, between biological and psychological factors, between psychological and social factors, and in the middle, there's also an overlap among the three of them. This is the reason why other pictorial, let's say, representation of the biopsychosocial model also populate the areas which we can find in the overlap between or among the cycles. So, for instance, in the area in between biological and psychological elements, we may have, for instance, stress, health conditions, or other illnesses. While in the area or in the overlap between biological and social elements, we may have isolation, imbalanced lifestyle, and also stress. In the overlap between social and psychological elements, we may have good mental state, stress again, and motivation. And in the overlap among the three of them, we have a broad conceptualization of health, which is the one which has been proposed already in 1948 by the World Health Organization, which refer to a global health which include both psychological, physical, mental, social elements in our life. So let's try indeed to consider these concepts, which is strongly related to the concepts, this concept of health, I mean, which was promoted by already 1948 by the World Health Organization, which also pertain to the concept of psychological well-being. Well, I have to say that in reality, in the words, in the clinical words, the term psychological well-being was entered by this lady, Maria Hoda, who was not a clinician. She was a sociologist, and but she wanted to give a reply to real problem according to social psychology, but in a really pragmatic way. Indeed, she said, all my work really started from real problems rather than from the problems of social psychology as a science. And the real core, of her work is this booklet. This is this current concept of positive mental health is a booklet which was published already in 1958 and which is nowadays available in the web free of charge, so it's an open source. And she devoted her activities to this book, which is and was the fruit of a strong collaboration of many authors in those days, which were members of a joint commission on mental health and illness, and all of them contributed to this book because they read the proofs, they made revisions, they included in Maria Hoda books the results of their scientific publication in those days. And these are not days too far from the ones that I mentioned before, in which the World Health Organization defines health as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So in those years, we have a fruitful field in which different people spread in the world were trying to define the condition of health as a global, comprehensive one. So, for instance, and in those days, Maria Hoda used the terms positive mental health, which is not only related, she said and wrote, to the absence of mental disease, which of course is needed, but not enough to have positive mental health. But it has also to have positive features, to have positive connotations. And of course, this may be related to different dimensions and elements. Indeed, she said that positive mental health is not, for instance, just be efficient or just content. It is, she wrote, the ability to maintain an even temper and alert intelligence, socially considerate behavior, and a happy disposition. She wrote, this, I think, is a healthy mind, so something really complex, which touches different aspects of our health and our functioning. And indeed, she created this scheme in which she highlights these 5 different dimensions, which can represent different aspects of psychological well-being. So autonomy, environmental mastery, which refers to the ability to have a correct manage of the environment in which we are immersed to, perception of environment and others. She highlighted the relevance of having or of conceiving ourselves as people always in growth, in development, in self-actualization, and also able to trust on positive relationship with others. And she also, and I put graphically this 6th dimension in the middle, because she also proposed this 6th dimension, which is a kind of hub of the other 5 dimensions she describes, and it refers to a balance and integration of psychic forces. So all of us as human beings, we may have the feeling that our psychic forces, the positive and the negative ones, want to bring us on their side. So if I'm sad, I feel that sadness try to absorb all my human dimension. If I'm happy or excited, such excitement wants to absorb all my human dimension. On the contrary, what Maria Oda proposed was that the real well-being is not related to being on the positive or on the negative, but on the contrary, to be in a condition of harmony, which can be represented by a balance among the different psychic forces who want to pull and push us every time. So let's have a look to some definition of all these 6 dimensions. So Maria Oda identified in autonomy a conscious discrimination by the individual of the environmental factors he or she wishes to accept or reject. In positive attitude toward others, she included consciousness, correctiveness, feeling about the self, sense of the identity. In growth, development, and self-actualization, she included self-realization and also a condition of growth and becoming. In perception of environmental and others, she included the perception of being free from need distortion, but also of having empathy and social sensitivity. In environmental mastery, she included the ability to love, to be adequate in love, in work, in play, in interpersonal relationships, to be efficient in meeting situational requirements, and having the capacity to adapt, adjust, and also of problem solving. While if we put attention to the 6th dimension that I described a little bit before, that is balance and integration of psychic forces, she tried to give some elements which can contribute in creating such balance. She said that it is related to integration of the personality. Integration itself refers to the relatedness of all processes and attributes in an individual. And also integration is a criterion for mental health, since it is based on balance of psychic forces in the individual, on having a unifying outlook in life, emphasizing cognitive aspects of integration, and being able to resist to stress, so not to be frustrated by stress. So stress, as we said before, I'm anticipating now a little bit, we saw that it's in the overlap of the different cycles of the biopsychosocial model. So a balance of psychic forces in the individual, according to these 2 authors, means also having flexibility, which is the essence of normality, in contrast to the freezing of behavior into patterns of unalterability that characterizes every manifestation of the neurotic process or are related to impulses. Having a unifying outlook in life means that a mature person participates and reflects, lives and loves according to some embracing philosophy of life, developed according to his or her own satisfaction, and representing him or herself in a place which is in the scheme of things. So like we may say a kind of deus ex machina of own life. So the feeling is that the person is working and living according to own purposes and meaning in life, which also imply self-actualization. Not because the person has a kind of predestination to develop it, but because the person has a unifying outlook which guides on actions and feelings, so that there is a continuous shaping of the present toward the future and according to those actions and feelings. And of course, a resistance to stress, as I anticipated, means not to be frustrated by stress, but to have a strong enough personality organization and to be secure enough to be able to stand the tension, instead of jumping to frustration and then also maybe to anxiety, panic, and so on. Later on, many decades later, this lady, Carol Riff, reappraised the dimensions which were proposed by Maria Ioda and tried to refine them. And for each dimension, she described a kind of range which identified the lower level of the specific dimension on one side, and on the other side, the higher level of each specific dimension. And she also ran a lot of research in order to give much more scientific evidence to this model and to this theory. More recently, this model has been strengthened also via other studies. For instance, Cashton is the author who strongly introduced the concept of psychological flexibility in the scientific world, defined it and also produced scientific data. And he defined psychological flexibility as a system related to dynamic process that unfold over time, and they can be reflected by how a person adapts to fluctuating situation of the mind, reconfigures mental resources, shift perspective, and balances competing desires, needs, and life domains. As you can see, it reminds us the concept of the balance of psychic forces, which was mentioned before. And Cashton also identified some building blocks of psychological flexibility. They pertain to executive functioning, to default mental state, and again, as was mentioned also by Maria Oda, to personality configurations. So executive functioning reflects the activity of the brain circuit. So here you can have a real strong biological background. Particularly, he said the frontal lobe, which prioritize and integrate cognitive capacity. So essentially, executive functioning provides critical neuropsychological support for self-regulation. So they also make people more versatile, able to use top-down strategies, and so to fit, in a certain sense, with a to fit into a changing reality. Default mental states refer to psychological, is a building block of psychological flexibility, in the sense that a person must maintain a delicate balance between investing an effort into current surroundings and conserving mental energy for potentially significant future situations, which is, if we want, a little bit related also to the concept of being a person in growth on one side, and also being able to manage the environment in which we are located in. One fundamental way we are able to achieve this balance is through stereotyping and habits that are really important for all of us. As with many psychological phenomena, sometimes automatic bottom-up processes are helpful, and other times they are harmful. And of course, this can be linked to all the main literature on certain type scientific literature on certain type of psychotherapy, which have their main work on replacing that, let's say, that habits, that automatic thoughts with new ones which can make the person much more able to adapt to the current condition. And finally, personality configuration, which according to Kashdam, refer to the dimensions of neuroticism, positive affectivity, self-control, and openness to experience. So if we want to try to put all these definitions into the biopsychosocial model, as I anticipated before, we refer to biological element of flexibility. We refer to the relevance of being able to tolerate stress. We refer to social aspects in relationship with other people, interpersonal relationship. We refer to psychological elements which pertain, for instance, to psychic forces, their balance, and so on. So we also referred, for instance, to the capacity to guide on life to a specific direction, which can pertain to a good mental state, to motivation. And so there are many, many facets that can allow us to consider psychological well-being, a concept, a construct which can well fit into the biopsychosocial model. Let's see if the same can be applied to the concept of resilience. First of all, here you can see a definition from the American Psychological Association of resilience, which is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even significant sources of stress. So already from this first definition, you can see that the concept of resilience is strongly related to stress and to what can, in a certain sense, be detrimental to our homeostatic balance related to the stress. Another definition given by Basten in 2014 to resilience refers to the capacity of a dynamic system to adapt successfully to disturbances that threaten the viability, the function, or the development of that system. So in this case, the focus is posed into the dynamic reality in which we are, and so to the need to dynamically adapt to the reality we are immersed to, especially when they are threatening our system, our balance. And according to Punterbrick and Lachman, 2013, resilience is a process to harness resources to sustain well-being. This is the reason why today we are talking about psychological well-being and resilience together, because in reality, we may say that resilience is subsumed under the chapter of psychological well-being, since it is one of the pillar which can contribute to sustain well-being. And this author wrote that they like the word process when they define resilience, because it implies that resilience is not something stable, it's not an attribute, but it is something dynamic, so it is a capacity. They also like the expression according to which resilience is an element to harness resources, because it means that to be resilient, we need to identify what are the most relevant resources to bring to build up or to empower psychological well-being. And finally, they also wrote that they like the expression sustain well-being, because resilience involves more than just a narrow definition or health or the absence of pathology. So it contributes to this comprehensive condition of harmony and health, which is linked to well-being. So let's see if also resilience can be conceived in a way in the biopsychosocial model. And to do this, first of all, it could be interesting to ask ourselves what makes some people more resilient than others, because we all know that resilience, being resilient is not the same for everyone, even in a normal range. There are people who have higher level of resilience, so they can also adapt better to threatening conditions. But on the other side, there are people that have lower level of resilience. And this author wrote that there are biological underpinnings of resilience. Probably they can be genetic, but for the moment, we don't have specific information on the gene, let's say, of resilience. And this is the reason why they say they think about resilience as a process. So we are talking about an organism that is actively interacting with the environment. This means that, of course, the biological and the genetic contribution is relevant, is important, is needed, but it is not everything. It might indeed be considered the fact that resilience is also related on how environmental events contribute to biological changes rather than the other way around. So there is a kind of continuous interplay, let's say, between the biological aspects and the environment. And so there is a reshaping by the environment of the biological aspects. So they go ahead, these authors, saying that they would imagine that what makes some people more resilient than others would be better support system, better opportunities, better DNA, and a host of other non-DNA factors, either appearing alone or interacting with one another. There are many different factors, so in the end, that could make some people more resilient than others. And so once again, probably we can use the biopsychosocial model to see the possible factors which may support resilience in people. So we already talked about biological factors. We know that there are also psychological factors which can contribute on it, which can pertain, for instance, to coping strategies, which can pertain, for instance, to cognitive functioning, and also social factors, which can pertain, for instance, to the social network in which we are located. So this may relate also to the concept of isolation. For instance, isolation and loneliness is a theme really relevant nowadays, which is brought typically for apparently different populations. At the beginning, it was brought for the elderly. So today we know that for all people, loneliness, some geriatricians say that for all people, loneliness is already a disorder. This can give us how much they consider it relevant. So not only a problem, not only a fact, but we are already conceiving it a disorder. And nowadays we are applying more or less the same view also to young people, because also a lack of a connection to the world and a condition of isolation we can be related to different causes in young from old people is considering a growing hot element, a growing hot issue, because it is strongly more and more related to their health status, not only mental health, but also physical health. And so once again, can be related to imbalanced lifestyle and so on. So I hope that this allows us to consider resilience as part of the biopsychosocial model. And I would like now also to add a few elements related to the biopsychosocial model, which highlight the fact that also the biopsychosocial model is a dynamic model. For instance, some authors proposed to include the spiritual element, especially those who work in oncology, because of course, people with cancer are facing death, and so they may have spiritual reflections and elements. And even more recently, the fourth pillar of the model has been proposed to be GER, so the concept of health in a comprehensive way, which includes also not only the environment, but also the planet in which we are located in. And this goes in the direction of the concept also of One Health that is promoted by also by the EUniWell Alliance with different activities and will be promoted as well. And in our world, in which we constantly live together with technology, there are some authors who also developed a conceptualization of the biopsychosocial model with a fourth element, which includes the digital actor, because we interact continuously with artificial intelligence, with avatar, they interact to us, and this interplay and this connection probably can modulate and reshape the emotional and cognitive also world of human being. Now I would like to devote a few minutes to this, as I mentioned at the beginning, few minutes to this short movie. And I hope you can find in this movie some elements of psychological well-being and resilience, and in some characters, and on the other side, in other characters, probably a lack of such elements. Let's see if I'm able to start the video. There are subtitles. It's in Italian, I'm sorry, but you can see the subtitles in English. I hope you can see. Now we have the music. I hope you can see and hear, listen to it.
Fiammetta, sorry, is there music? Like, is there music playing in the background already?
Yes.
Okay, because we cannot hear it.
Okay. Off my hearings and try again. Can you listen to it now or not?
No.
Mostly you have to stop sharing your screen, and then you have to start again to share your screen, and then you have to click a small box, and it usually writes include the sound. When you now start again by sharing your screen over Zoom.
Okay, I stop screen, so I stop sharing the screen. Now I will share it again if I well understood.
And then before you share it, there's a box to click, include the sound.
Okay, share the sound probably. Okay, I try again.
Invita la cittadinanza a restare in casa e ad uscire solo per approvvigionamento alimentare o farmaceutico, nel rispetto delle norme anti-contagio, e cioè con mascherine per proteggersi bocca e naso.
È chiuso?
Sì,
Otto non c'è.
Odo sta a casa.
Non lo può chiamare.
Che gli dico?
Lui mi conosce, io vengo sempre qui.
Che è piatto fisso?
Diciamo di sì.
No, non la posso far entrare.
Ma io devo entrare.
No, devo tenere chiuso. Poi è tutto chiuso, non posso tenere aperto il cimitero, capito? Mi metto in difficoltà.
Posso darle questi?
Che ci faccio? Mi piace questo? Mi tocca scadere i soldi.
No, non posso.
Vedi che Odo gli ha preso bello forte. Non lo so quando torna.
Mi fa entrare subito.
Sto aprendo.
Lo so. Mi devi perdonare. Ma almeno sto qua.
Non ti preoccupare. No, ma come che fai?
Se io fossi come te, cambierei il mondo. Lo farei a tua immagine, perché io sono uno stronzo. Se io fossi come te, mangerei di tutto e non ingrasserei mai più, non terrei tutto dentro. E quando sarai troppo triste ti giuro che io ti farò ridere, se mi conserverai con te le traslochi nelle scatole. E quando sarai troppo sola promettimi che mi porterai con te e che ti consolerai tra le braccia dei marinai. Se io fossi come te, fermerei il tempo.
Okay, it's always difficult to go ahead after this short movie, at least to me. Even though I watch it so many times. Okay, so my conclusion is that I hope that you could find some elements of psychological well-being, resilience in these different characters. And I would like to close my presentation simply remembering the biopsychosocial model suggested by George Engel in 1977. Which was a model proposed to provide a blueprint for research, a framework for teaching, and a design for action in the real world of healthcare. And I thank you for your attention. And if you want to make questions or comments, please, the floor is for everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fiammetta. It was really, really moving. It's very hard, as you were saying, talking after this presentation, this little movie. But as Fiammetta was saying, if there's any question that the audience want to make to Fiammetta, this is the right time. So if you have any question, you can raise your hand. I can give you the floor in any minute. I do have a question, but I don't want to like overstep to other people. So please, I try to recompose myself and then I make the question, but if you have one, please do it right now. So I don't see any hands raised, but it's okay. So Fiammetta, I just have a question. And in the beginning, you mentioned like the whole structure of the model. So you were saying different aspects and the main three. I was wondering if I wrote the question down while we were talking. If this model in real hospital settings is something that it's really applied, or is there like any barrier, and what are those barriers in real medical settings? But that was my question.
Yeah. There is also a kind of literature which I also took part to a European project which also tried to investigate possible barriers to the application and implementation of the model, because and the ones that are considered the most common, for instance, in Europe, are related to time constraints, because we know that nowadays, especially hospitals or people, clinicians working in hospital or health providers are always really stressed about the fact that they don't have enough time. And of course, if you have a short time, there is the risk just to take care of the basics elements without, of course, trying to save some time also to address to the patient as a person rather than only as a carrier of the disease. Another issue is related to the element of training, because while there are some nations in the world, and there are only a few, in which the biopsychosocial model is really trained as part of psychosomatic medicine, which is recognized as a discipline. Some examples are Germany and also Austria, quite good also in Switzerland, but there are good examples in the US, but they are only, it's really jeopardized the reality in the US. So this means, of course, that there are some people who have a certain model which shape their clinical work, and other people who don't have the same model. And this heterogeneity, in some cases, can be a richness, but in other cases can be, of course, a barrier to give continuity of care to the patient. And related to this, when healthcare providers were interviewed about possible barriers, they also found that another barrier is related to training. Because, of course, in those countries in which psychosomatic medicine is not recognized as a discipline, of course, you can be trained in such principles and models, but only on a volunteer basis, let's say. So if I go to a conference talking about psychosomatic medicine, of course, I'm training myself in psychosomatic medicine. But if I do not attend that conference or that course, of course, this information do not enter in my training. And so more or less, these are the barriers. And I have to say that these were mainly mentioned in countries such as Poland, Italy, so where psychosomatic medicine is less strong, while in countries such as the Netherlands and Germany, in which is more strong, they highlighted the fact that even though they have such a discipline training and clinicians, the difficulty in that case is to be really integrated into care with other healthcare providers. Instead of being a little bit isolated, even though they are not isolated, I'm speaking maybe with using too strong expression, but there's a need to get melted in a way with the activity of other people in order to create a real care path of the patient. This is the reason why, for instance, this project was supported by the European Union, this ETUDE project, because there's need to create a kind of common culture, at least in a relatively small, let's say, region as Europe.
Yes, exactly. I think it's also depending on the workload of the single medicine in different countries, because they're figuring out different situations. Thinking of Italy, it's completely different from other countries.
Yes, completely. Even though when we made this kind of survey, we found that, for instance, the nation in which psychosomatic medicine is not recognized tend to have similar characteristics, as well as those in which it is recognized. They tend to have a similar background. Then there are peculiarities, of course, which differ from country to country.
Okay, thank you very much, Fiammetta.
Thank you for the attention and the question as well.
So if there's not any other question, I will interrupt the recording.